Jeffrey, thank you for being here with me today.
Okay, good.
Jeffrey, I have a bunch of questions for you. The first question is this problem, the obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, do you think is something genetic, is something learned, a mixture of the two things? What is your opinion after so many years in it?
Okay, so if you're talking about the disorder itself, in many ways, I have another book, You Are Not Your Brain, and in many ways, I certainly believe that the mind can change the brain, but obsessive compulsive disorder, it's one of those things that I basically agree pretty completely with sort of the main perspective in biological psychiatry. In this particular case, I mean, obsessive compulsive disorder, as a disorder, because there's also compulsive personality thing, other things that carry that name, but the actual disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is a biological disorder. I mean, you're not going to get real obsessive compulsive disorder unless something is going on in your brain. So the thing that that really makes that, I think, the most clear is how how you get these intrusive, unwanted thoughts and urges that really don't make sense to the person. And on some level, the person really knows that this doesn't really make sense. And people who have OCD, have that happen. And that doesn't happen like that just from psychological or learned elements, although it definitely has psychological and learned elements that influence the course that it takes. And we certainly believe that psychological and learned elements can change that brain chemistry in ways that help. And so what goes along with that is that if you don't do the right things, psychological and learned things can make it worse. But there is an underlying brain problem. And so brain lock is real. I mean, it's not, and yes, it's genetic. It has a genetic component to it.
That's it. I think I agree with you completely for all for my experience. And I think this is very important for people to know, because they have to distinguish very well their obsessive thinking from the other kind of worries that everybody has and that they demand to be solved, and the ones from the disorder that you don't have to solve, just you have to leave them unresolved, which is a very different thing. So you have to be very aware that this is very different. And in this sense, I know some other authors, experts or so-called experts in OCD, that they mix the normal worries of people with the OCD worries. In my opinion, is very different, because if you don't distinguish very well one thing from the other, how you can help the people to leave those thoughts apart, not to give them credit. So to me, it's very important to distinguish that if you've got OCD, you are a different person, and you need something different for this kind of worries. Do you agree with me?
I do agree with that. And we had a line going all the way back. I mean, as long as we're doing this, I mean, this is actually the 20th anniversary edition, so it just came out a couple of years ago. But cool. And then it has these brain pictures in the back that there's brain stuff going on. I mean, but the whole point is that you can change your brain. But in that book, even in the original edition of it, that was like the 20th anniversary edition, which now is over 25 years ago. But we had a saying, it's not how you feel, it's what you do that counts. So the thing that really makes OCD not get better, that will make it worse, is trying to get rid of the feeling. I mean, you have this uncomfortable, bothersome feeling, and then you have the feeling that if you do something, wash, check, repetitive behaviors, other kinds of rituals, it's going to somehow make that feeling get better.
Exactly.
That's not true. And
exactly.
It's very consistent with what you just said. I mean, the whole idea of using, relabeling and reattributing it to your brain
Exactly.
is so that you can realize this feeling, the way I'm going to diminish it is by learning how to refocus away from it. And then that's why there is definitely a role for medication. I mean, there is a role for medication in treating OCD. I don't consider that up for question. I don't consider it honestly ethical to say there's no role for medication in OCD. And there are people who say that, and I really believe they're making a bad mistake. Now, how you use medication in OCD, or going to the other extreme, which a lot of biologically oriented psychiatrists do, and say it's a brain disease, we treat it with biological, we treat it with medication, we treat it with, transcranial magnetic stimulation, whatever. I mean, and that's what we do. That's not equally, but that's also a big mistake. So OCD is basically, it's one of the reasons I got so interested in it. It's a classic example of, it's biological, but how you understand that and remembering that it's biological, and then acting in ways that can change that biology based on how you refocus your attention and the choices you make on how to deal with those bothersome feelings, together with medication. And not everyone needs medication. Not everyone needs medication. But I think everyone who has real OCD needs to do some version of recognizing what it is, and not listening to it and focusing away from it.
In fact, Jeffrey, I don't know if you know this book, which is translated into Spanish. It's from two authors.
Okay, no, I don't know that book.
It is Sally Winston and Martin Sage.
Oh, okay. Well, I just didn't. Yeah, no, of course I know that book. I mean, I don't know it well. I didn't recognize it in Spanish. I mean, yeah. I mean,
but they mix.
People tell me that it uses a similar perspective to the one.
I think it has very good points, but the bad point is that it mixes, because the title of the book is Guide to Overcome the worrying thoughts,
obsessive thoughts. I mean, overcome obsessive thoughts, I think is what
exactly. But what it does, it mix all kind of problems, and this is what I don't agree, because it's different, because when you have a normal worry, you can solve it, or you can think it away by thinking correctly with cognitive therapy. But when you go OCD, no, don't use mainly cognitive therapy, because it's not what you need. So,
okay. I mean, there's simply no question about it. That book has displaced Brainlock as the best-selling OCD or obsessive book. I mean, that book sells Brainlock still sells well, okay, but that book sells better. And so whatever, I mean, marketing, whatever you want. I mean, but that perspective, let's just say, is an easier sell in some ways, but I think it's incorrect. And I think if you have real OCD, yeah, I mean, OCD,
it's different.
It is. I mean, it's so, I mean, this thing recently just happened last week in the United States, where Stanford University came out of lists of words that people shouldn't use anymore. It's very tied into, you know, the cultural, you know, wokeism or whatever you want to call it. And literally one of the things they put in the list is OCD. Don't call people OCD, because they didn't even, I mean, and that's true, because OCD has become a catchphrase. Like everyone has
Exactly.
OCD. Everyone
Exactly.
does not have
No, no,
real, you know, real obsessive compulsive disorder. In fact,
absolutely.
it's not rare. I mean,
It's
somewhere around 2
5%
to
something.
3% of people have it
Mm.
in some, but it's so, you know, but everyone has, you know, bothersome thoughts, etc. So you can see why, if you know, whatever, that's how that happens.
I agree. Yeah, let's explain your 4 steps to overcome. Can you tell us very briefly which are the 4 steps of your
Okay,
method?
so basically, the 4 steps, which is what the book is based on, and then subsequent books that I have written, one of which is called "You Are Not Your Brain," and then it's even become a business leadership book using that method in a book called The
Wow.
Wise Advocate. So it's based in a traditional understanding of mindfulness and what mindfulness is. So mindfulness is an inner, clear-minded inner view of what's going on in your conscious, so in your consciousness.
Yes.
And so the first step is relabel, and that helps you get that outer perspective. Sometimes like to call it a third person outer perspective on your first person inner experience. So you're watching, it's an observational perspective. So relabeling helps to get that observational perspective where you go, you know, this urge, this is an urge, this is, and in the next step, reattribute, you're going to strengthen the understanding of what it is by saying it's an obsessive thought, it's a compulsive urge, and it's caused by my brain. So that's where the reattribute part comes in. My brain is causing me to feel this, but it's not really me. And that's another really good saying. It's not me, it's the OCD.
Exactly.
So you're really trying to make this differentiation, which is basically what you just said, that you are not what your OCD is. Exactly. Your OCD is your brain doing something, you know, based on circuitry not working right, but you can do something about it and it's not you. So you relabel and reattribute, which basically means you recognize what the intrusive, bothersome feeling is and where it comes from your brain. Okay, so on one level, that means you're going to have to sort of cope with it, deal with it, manage it, because it's not going to go away right away. And that's where medication comes in, because medication can help diminish the intensity of it, which definitely can help make the 4 steps easier to do, and especially makes that third step, because the third step is really, you know, where the action is. You know, you got to do something, and what that do something is refocus. So relabel, reattribute, which in the later versions becomes reframe. Reframe means, is it true? Frame this. What is it? If it real or is it not real? Is it going in a good direction or a harmful direction? OCD is, in some genuine sense, not true, not real. It's your brain sending a false message. So you relabel, you reattribute it to your brain, which involves reframing and realizing it's not true. And then step 3 is refocus. You really need to do something else. You can't sit there and just fight with it. You have to specifically do another behavior. do
Exactly.
something else.
Something different.
Change your focus of attention with it there, still bothering you.
Exactly.
And then we came up with things like, the 2-minute rule, where at least for 2 minutes, try to do something else and then reassess, and when you do that regularly, your brain changes. And step 4 is revalue. And you then begin to much more quickly see what it is, because you revalue it and say, this is not something worth listening to. I understand what this is.
Fantastic.
So revaluing happens by relabeling, reattributing, and refocusing, and seeing, now I know what it is, and I put a different value on it when it occurs.
Okay. And we here in the book, into the book, just in the index, we've got the 4 points, the 4 steps, and they are explained inside the book.
Yeah, that's right. In the back of the book, there's a treatment manual that you can read separately. You can read independently. That's right. I'm happy you're pointing that out. The last, 20 or so pages of the book is a separate treatment manual that you can read independently, that really summarizes how to do, what I just said.
Fantastic. Yeah, another question, Jeffrey. I know that you're a practitioner of meditation. You like meditation. So, we can establish a link between meditation and behavioral psychology as well, because there has many points in common. Is it right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's kind of what I just said. I'm applying, because mindfulness is a meditative technique. I mean, really done in a rigorous way, requires doing a meditative practice. But you take the kind of observation that you use in that meditative practice, this clear-minded observational perspective, and then you apply it. And that's why right away there's another book, You Are Not Your Brain, which is how to apply it to other things besides obsessive compulsive disorder.
But
and then it became a business leadership. And then I wrote the Mind and the Brain, which really explains, the underlying neuroscience. I mean, that is a science book.
That's so
that
cool.
was a little more difficult. It's not for everybody, but there's a book explaining the underlying science that explains how the brain changes when you refocus your attention.
Wow, that's so cool. But do you think a person with OCD can get better or even kind of fix only with meditation? What do you think about this?
Okay, I mean, look, I have a good friend, who really deeply believes that's exactly what he did, but by and large, you can't depend on that. That I wouldn't call that shall we say, a medical approach, right? I mean, and you can, and if you really do it sort of, rigorously enough and are disciplined in refocusing your attention adequately, which is what meditation is to a very significant degree. It's training in ways of focusing your attention and refocusing your attention. And a big part of mindfulness practice is how to return to awareness of in and out breathing when your mind wanders. And okay, if you really discipline your attention extremely well, you can cause enough brain changes so that the bothersome thoughts become so ignorable, so readily not bothersome, that even though they're still there, they were like way in the background, and for all intents and purposes, it's as if they're not there. And then some of the time, they're not there. I mean, so it is a matter of degree, but by and large, the goal, especially in the beginning, of making the thoughts go away is not a particularly good goal. It's a
Yeah.
problem having
Yeah.
that as the goal,
Yeah. Absolutely.
because it gets in the way of managing your response to it, which is really what's more important.
So we could say that, well, it's more secure, much more secure for the general public to do our behavioral therapy than meditation in general, we would say, no?
Well, when you say behavioral therapy, again, you got to be careful with that too, especially in the history of this disorder, because I would never say behavioral therapy in the absence of saying cognitive behavioral therapy, because as
It's different,
you
yes.
probably know and are just forgetting right there, the original treatment for OCD, which is still a predominant treatment, is what's called exposure and response prevention, which is this B.F. Skinner, behaviorist, no mind, no choice, external conditioning of people with obsessive compulsive disorder. And that's what behaviorism is to a significant degree. So as soon as you say behavioral treatment, I'm going, whoa, be careful with that.
Okay.
Because that has a bad history in OCD as far as I'm concerned.
How we can call it?
On one hand, you have to deal with the medication people, and then on the other hand, you have to deal with the behaviorists who have dominated the field since the very beginning of it, and I'm old enough to have been around basically at the very beginning of it. And
how we can call it?
So, you want to have and if you don't want to use, meditative, mindfulness per se, but mindfulness is now a much more popular term than it was 30 years ago in mainstream mental health, but cognitive behavioral go together. And there's a very strong cognitive component in relabeling, understanding that it's OCD, understanding this isn't me, understanding this is false. I mean, that's the heart and soul of cognitive therapy, is recognizing it as a cognitive distortion, which I call in my work a deceptive brain message.
Okay, cool.
It's a deceptive brain message.
Very good point. And Jeffrey, to finish, which tip you can give to everyone which is listening that might have OCD in this right moment? Just one or two tips to give them.
Yeah, there are no hidden tips.
With all your experience.
They're all in what I just said. I mean, the biggest tip is realize that when you're just trying to make that feeling go away, you're really not going to be helping the situation. I mean, okay, if it's overwhelming you, then there is a definite role for serotonin uptake blocking medications, which is a general class of very commonly used medications that are good for a lot of other things. They're now actually the primary treatment for anxiety as well. But they seem to work. They don't seem to work. They do have a specific effect on diminishing the bothersomeness of OCD intrusive. And that's the thing, they're intrusive. They come in against your will. They bother you. They attack you. You feel like you're being attacked. And so obviously it's only natural to want that to go away. But it turns out, because the medications don't generally make it totally go away. And then even so, the amount of medication it takes to really do that is higher than it would need to be, which leads to side effects, et cetera, et cetera. So with using, cognitive, behavioral, and the behavioral is refocusing. The cognitive is relabeling, reframing, reattributing, understanding what it is. You can change your brain. It helps the medication. You can lower the dose, and so you want to learn how to refocus your attention and understand, in the context of understanding, this is not me, it's OCD. I can, it's not how I feel, it's what I do. And what you want to do is focus on another activity.
And the brain changes.
And then the brain changes.
We
That's
know
right.
this, and you
And
know
then
it
we
very
call
well.
that self-directed neuroplasticity.
Wow.
You can change, you're changing your own. When you refocus, that effort that you're making is the effort that's changing your own brain.
Wow. So, Jeffrey, thank you very much for this talk. We remember to everyone that this book, Desbloquea tu cerebro, is already in every bookshop. Ya lo podéis comprar, es el mejor, the best book, the best manual for OCD in the market everywhere. So thank you very much, Jeffrey, for this talk, and see you soon in some months in
Yeah,
Granada.
that's right. I mean, we're coming to Granada to, you know, for this OCD conference.
Exactly,
Yeah,
which is the
and so you're going to help them to publicize that too. Very good.
exactly. We in June in my internet means in Instagram, in my Facebook, is all the details of this conference, and everybody interested can go. They will listen to you there. I will be there as well. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, and see you very soon. Thank you.
Adios.